Well, hey everyone, doing another Criterion selection pick. This time I got my friend Joey.
Hello.
And we actually are going to start a podcast soon, and so we won't be seeing his mug as much, or but we'll be doing something his mug. But we'll be doing something really soon. But we wanted to shoot a really quick kind of Criterion selection pick, Criterion Closet Pick, and so we kind of thought of some things. Joey, since you're our guest, what do you want to grab from the Criterion selection here?
Okay. First, I'd like to go ahead and start off with the one that you don't have on Blu-ray because it hasn't been released on Blu-ray yet.
I'm looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, one of these days. Is The Spirit of the Beehive, which is probably one of the best coming-of-age films that I can really think of.
Well, it's something I still need to see, so I'm looking forward to capturing that. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that when we sit down and finally talk about it a little bit more. Yeah. Hopefully not spoilery, because I'm sure Joey can do that.
No, yeah. I will say that, like, even though, you can tell it's about children and, like, growing up and experiencing certain emotions for the first time, it's a very unique approach to that form of storytelling. And yeah, it's definitely a genre that is done a lot, especially within like foreign and independent film. But The Spirit of the Beehive does it in like a really completely unique sort of way. So
excellent.
Yeah, it definitely stuck out to me for that reason.
Well, that is a good first pick. It's definitely one of them that I am looking forward to seeing. So, since it's the new year, I've been thinking of some things that are kind of new beginnings and relationships. I've been thinking about that as well. And one of the films that I've recently seen is actually a pretty controversial one. It's a French film, Blue is the Warmest Color. This is a film about two women who fall in love with each other, and it's a really kind of sexual awakening, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. This is my first pick, though, and so I really enjoyed this film. Joey, be my guest and pick another one.
I'm gonna hop over here, and I'm gonna grab The Innocents, which is kind of like your classic, I guess, Hollywood, old school gothic ghost story, but kind of with a little bit of a weird, subversive, almost transgressive edge to it. It's got amazing performances. There's Deborah Kerr is the lead in it. She's great, and the two children that are
children are so terrifying.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Just especially one of the monologues, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, because that's an amazing pick.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to bounce off that because the cinematography in this movie is really reminiscent of a film I'm going to pick. Which kind of came around the same time period a little bit earlier, though, and that is going to be Night of the Hunter. This is one of my favorite horror movies I've ever seen, if you consider it a horror movie, I suppose. This is one of those just intense movies, especially by Robert Mitchum, who just plays a really great psychopath in this movie, and so I'm really looking forward to talking about that. So I think that's thematically a pretty good combo right there. Mm-hmm. All right, Joey, last pick.
My last one. Okay, so I'll grab that. My last choice is probably going to go ahead and be Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. It's another one that goes in certain directions you wouldn't expect it to. It goes to really weird places. It challenges certain ideas about love and about human connections.
And that was his debut film, right?
Yeah, it was his first one. He definitely made a pretty big splash with it. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, excellent last pick. And I think for my last pick, I actually recently picked up a movie, and I'm going to get off screen real quick. I picked up Plague Dogs, which actually came out today. And this is the same filmmaker and studio that brought you Watership Down, which is going to be my pick. And Watership Down is one of my favorite books by Richard Adams, and this is actually one of my favorite animated films. In fact, I watched it with Joey for the first time back, I think, last year. And so I really, really love this movie, and I can't wait to talk about it a little bit more. So we're going to sit down, and we're going to talk a little bit more about each one of these films and why they're so important to us. All right, so since Joey picked first, I'm going to let him go ahead and start off, if you want. Tell me a little bit about Spirit of the Beehive.
Well, first, I had to mention that if I knew that you had Super Troopers 2 down there, that would have been one of my choices, but I guess it's too late for that now.
Well, once Criterion releases it, I'll put that up on the shelf.
Sure.
Super Troopers 2.
Alright. So yeah, Spirit of the Beehive. It's directed by Victor Arias. Yeah, it came out in '73, Spanish language film. It's basically like about this, I don't know if you'd call it like a boarding school or just a small village where it's like yeah, I guess it's like a boarding school with these young girls that live together, and basically there are themes surrounding like war and having to deal with like kind of the evils of that while, you know, basically growing up and learning about the world. In addition to that, there's also one of the really major things about this movie is there's like in the opening scene is when like the traveling movie company like brings a copy of Frankenstein.
Oh, really?
And they screen it for the kids.
That's okay. I have something to say about that, but continue.
Yeah. It's basically just about like learning about evil and about the human capacity of being capable of doing bad things. And it's very powerful in that way. It kind of handles that in a way that I don't think I'd ever seen before.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But speaking of Frankenstein, I know that Guillermo del Toro, this is one of his favorite films of all time. I think he grew up with this film. And so you bringing up Frankenstein, obviously del Toro's obviously one of those masters of, you know, dark kind of horror, and also at the same time, you know, the Spanish language he really loves because that's where he grew up in Mexico. And so it makes sense that's one of his favorite films and one of the ones that kind of influenced him.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It definitely has like that kind of dark, almost fairy tale sort of vibe to it.
And even the orphanage thing you were talking about, it has a very similar vibe to a lot of his films.
Yeah, like Devil's Backbone.
Yeah, and just that lost childhood essence, probably.
Yeah.
That innocence that is there, that is present in a lot of his films.
Right.
So excellent. I really can't wait to see this film. I've been kind of putting it off because I really wanted to get this on Blu-ray, but it's one of the only ones that I think it's the only DVD I have in the collection.
I mean, they have to do that soon. I mean, it's one that a lot of people, well, a fair amount of people know about and love, and yeah, I imagine it would be in the works.
I would assume so too, because I've seen it in a lot of top 10 lists for a lot of people who in their collection. So, excellent first pick from Joey. Now we're going to move on to a very interesting film. Blue is the Warmest Color. So this movie I have been putting off for a while because it's pretty long. It's 3 hours long. And it's also one of those movies that is very realistic. And when I say realistic, I mean in like to some people in a pornographic kind of way. Even though it's an artistic film, and that's how I view it. Obviously, it's of this really young couple who more or less they come to pass and see each other, and then there's this unbridled, really small kind of love that they have for each other, and you know that's what it explores. It explores that really new kind of beginnings for love.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a new experience for both of them in different ways. One of them has had some issues with some of the boys from her school, and she's a little bit younger, and then the other one is a little bit more experienced, but at the same time, this is a new experience because, you know, she's never felt anything like this before.
Yeah, it's like Adele, I think is the name of the protagonist. I think it's like about how like this sort of love that she, you know, first experiences, it like releases just like something within her, like this passionate side of her that had never really been explored yet, hadn't found an outlet for yet. And I think because of that, it makes it like, it's obviously a love story, but it's also like a really great film about like sexual awakening, obviously, and maturity, growing up.
And something that I really, really enjoyed about this film, but also kind of like really sunk and hit really hard, is this is very reminiscent, at least in my experience, to a lot of first-time relationships. Mm-hmm. Ones where you kind of fall in love for the first time, and you're really ill-experienced about it. And I know from my own personal experience, the person, I don't want to really obviously go too much into detail, but it felt very real. This relationship between the two characters felt very real, and I honestly think that's what makes it so compelling, is because you can feel it too. And so, especially if you've been through something similar to this. Yeah. So, that is my first pick. Joey, you want to move on to a scary pick? Ooh.
Yeah, it's very scary. It's called The Innocents, directed by Jack Clayton.
The only movie he did.
Yeah, it was a Truman Capote adaptation. No, wait, co-written by Truman Capote. He wrote the screenplay for it. My bad. Anyway. Yeah, kind of what I was going off of earlier. It's it kind of has like the beginnings of what you would, you know, expect from like a kind of gothic, old school, black and white ghost story. But then it goes in some really twisted, especially for its time. It came out in 1961, and it goes in some really wild directions with its characters and with its subject matter and with its implications. It's got some really amazing imagery too.
It's twisted imagery too.
Yeah, definitely. The performances, like I had said earlier, are really great and really sell it because it is kind of out there, but you are totally on board with it from beginning to end.
It's one of those films, I feel, it's one of those early atmospheric films that like really draw you in, because you really don't know what's going on. And honestly, until the very end, you still probably don't even know what's going on.
Right.
But that's what makes it so enchanting, and honestly, that's it's very reminiscent of a lot of the current horror films that I've enjoyed, like Hereditary or The Witch, where it has a very slow burn to it that, you know, doesn't really reveal itself even entirely throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
And the creepiness and the atmosphere. This is like a couple years before The Haunting, which came out in 1963, which is another really fantastic horror film. And this movie, like I said, it really set a bar, I feel like, for a lot of those independent horror films.
Yeah, definitely.
And
it feels like it could have been made recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of reminded me of something else that was recent. It made me, The Little Stranger.
Oh yes,
it definitely reminded me of this quite a bit.
With Domhnall Gleeson.
Yeah,
very underrated and not really talked about film.
Yeah, not at all. It just kind of came and went. But yeah, if you're into horror and you're into kind of like this newer boom of really cool, atmospheric, genuinely unnerving horror films that have come out recently, then you should definitely seek out The Innocents. It'll stay with you, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely very like exactly like Joey said. It'll stay with you, and honestly, there's several moments in that movie that just really creep me out. But on that note, something kind of similar to it in a way is The Night of the Hunter. Now, this movie was directed by Charles Laughton. And this movie is starring Robert Mitchum. in the character role that I always picture him in. He was really good in Cape Fear that I watched him. He obviously came out a little bit later.
Yeah.
But this movie is about a psychopath who is just this predator, and you can just tell by this image right here of this little girl and this doll. He's trying to get some money that him and Robert Mitchum himself and her father had procured because they robbed a bank, I think. I think that's what they did. And I think her father hid it in this doll, and more or less he died.
Yeah.
And Robert Mitchum is trying to find this thing.
Yeah. He knows about it, and he's basically manipulating his way. He's infiltrating this family, basically. And it's chilling.
It's sadistic, and just like The Innocents, the atmosphere of this movie, especially the cinematography, are just insanely great. Yeah. And I just remember so much insane pictures and one-shots and just in long tracking shots from this film that just stick with me. The shadows really play a huge role in this movie, and just sticks with you. Because it just, like I said, Robert Mitchum's performance as this psychotic psychopath manipulating this family, it's just, there's twists and turns, and kind of just like with The Innocents, this movie feels like it could have been made recently.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially, and this, predates things like Psycho by 5 years. Yeah. And this has very Psycho-esque tendencies, even though it was before it.
That's pretty crazy.
And so I honestly think that probably Alfred Hitchcock took some things from that movie and from this particular one.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good movie.
Yeah. And yeah, that's actually really surprising that they came before Psycho, because it feels like, I don't know, they kind of go hand in hand, or yeah. It wouldn't surprise me at all if like maybe Hitchcock saw that and realized that, like, maybe it's time for, maybe now is the time to actually kind of push boundaries more, because The Night of the Hunter definitely feels like it's ahead of its time in a way. Definitely. It
pushed cultural boundaries, that's for sure. And it's one of those movies that, honestly, you just like with The Innocents, I think it's a good double feature, and both movies you will not forget.
It would honestly go really well with Spirit of the Beehive too, because I just kind of put this together just now. Like what the kids go through in that is kind of, it goes well with what the kids in this movie do as well.
Blissfully unaware of the evil around them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, let's do our last final picks.
Right. So my last one is going to be Sex, Lies, and Videotape, the debut film from Steven Soderbergh, who's a phenomenal director. He's very chameleonic. He does so many different things, but he manages to make it work most of the time. But yeah, the way that he started out with a Sex, Lies, and Videotape, it's a film that really challenges the way that you think of intimacy. It really gets uncomfortable and weird.
Absolutely, yeah.
At times. And yeah, just the fact that somebody in their debut feature could, make something so bold and so controversial, and not have it really feel pretentious at all.
No.
Yeah.
It feels set up honestly like a TV movie.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely not.
Yeah, it takes a turn, definitely. Yeah. Spader.
Yeah.
His performance and his look is pretty unforgettable. Andy McDowell is great too. Their scene towards the end where they basically confront each other about, their roles, is really riveting. It's so well written. The dialogue is just so well done. Yeah, there's a reason why Sex Lies pretty much became a classic in independent film overall.
And absolutely, and I honestly think that just like a lot of the movies we've been talking about, a lot of the ones that we've picked have been cultural, like they have pushed cultural boundaries quite a bit. And this movie definitely did, especially in the eyes of whether or not something is okay. And it talks about morals and morality a lot and what we do to each other.
Yeah.
And it really explores that relationship. And that's something I really liked when I finally watched this film. I actually watched it when it came out on Criterion finally. And I was blown away by, like Joey said, the dialogue really threw me for a loop. Just how well it was, because like I said before, it kind of was set up like a TV movie. That's what it felt like at first. And I'm like, okay, what am I watching? And then it just took a sharp, 180 and then became something completely different.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, last movie. We're going to go a little bit brighter, but also still dark. And Watership Down. This is based on a book by Richard Adams, British novel. Very kind of Hobbit-esque.
Yeah.
It's of these rabbits who are, one of them has dreams and premonitions of a tragedy that's going to befell their why can't I think of, the Warren, which is where rabbits live. And more or less that thing happens, but since the other one, I'm literally blanking on the name, but since the premonition happened, they got out alive, and it's just set on them going on this journey, trying to find new land and also just a new home, but all of the craziness along the way, and all of the treachery, and all of just what life throws at you. You have a lot of people you can trust and distrust, and there's a lot of symbolism in this movie.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of symbolism. It's just one of those movies that really made me think when I was younger. And I remember reading this actually in high school and just being blown away by the amount of attention to detail. And the reason I actually found this movie was from a band, actually, a British band, Fall of Afrafa, which Afrafa is what I think is God.
Yeah.
Is what the rabbit god is in this folklore, in this fiction made by Richard Adams. And Fall of Afrafa, Fall of God, there's very heavy religious undertones to this movie, and a lot of so what I'm talking about is I got really into this band. I started reading into it, and I just thought the lore was really interesting and really dark, and definitely one of those things that's like right in between a kid's movie and an adult movie.
It's like, it looks like a kid's movie, but then when you really read into it, there's a lot more going on there besides just a movie about a bunch of rabbits running around.
Yeah, and I mean, Joey and I both watched this movie together for the first time, and what do you think of it?
I was really blown away by it. It's like I had mentioned, it goes beyond your expectations of it. I knew that, it was based on a novel, obviously. But, yeah, like I was not expecting it to get really as deep and philosophical as it does about, like, a higher power and sort of finding a new place for yourself in the world. There's a surprising amount of depth to it. It's pretty shocking what happens in there sometimes. You kind of grow to become attached to these characters, and then really awful things happen to them.
And they're just trying to exist, in all honesty, and that's what a lot of these characters, even the ones that are kind of portrayed as villains, I feel like, they're just trying to exist. And I honestly think that the main antagonist in the movie, near the end, is very reminiscent to a lot of the political disposition today, and a lot of the fear that we have as a society, and those fears kind of manifest into things that possibly might turn out to be probably regressive for humanity. And so that's something that I thought was interesting about this movie too.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, it's not a new movie by any means, but it's still, it has themes and ideas that still kind of reverberate up until now, and I think it says a lot about it.
Yeah. So I want to thank Joey for you know, being able to come on to this and talk a little bit about some of his favorite movies from the
Pleasure was
Criterion.
all mine.
So Joey and I will be starting a podcast soon. We're actually going to shoot our first episode tonight, and so hopefully that that either will be before this or after. I don't know when I'll be putting this video up, but thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Joey for showing up.
Thank
And give this video a like, comment down below, share this video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.
Bye.